Welcome back to another episode of Field to FenceLine, where neighbors, nature, and news meet. The holidays are a busy time in central Wisconsin, and scammers are easy to take advantage of our holiday hopes to find the perfect gift for a loved one on our list or to find ways to give back to the community. Midwest Farm Report recently provided consumers with a number of ways to avoid getting scammed this holiday season. Avoid paying up front for anything through a peer-to-peer marketplace. When possible, meet the seller in person at a busy public location. Don't open suspicious links in emails or return text messages from unknown numbers claiming to be a retailer or a shipping company. Delete these, and if there is a concern, make contact with the company yourself through a trusted contact information. When looking to make a donation to a local nonprofit organization, initiate that contact yourself, rather than send money or gift cards to an unknown entity. Be especially cautious when asked to send gift cards to a nonprofit, no matter the cause, as scammers often use gift cards as they are hard to track. To read the full report, see the Midwest Farm website. The DNR recently released their preliminary 2025 deer hunting license and harvest totals up through the end of the 9-day gun deer hunt season. Licensed sales through the 9-day were down only slightly to 790,044, which is only down 0.12% from last year. When it comes to harvest numbers, the antlered harvest was down 2.6% and antlerless harvest was up 0.9% from the same period in 2014. Viewers should keep in mind, however, that last year saw 13 deer management units have record buck harvests. Preliminary numbers through the close of the gun deer season, including all seasons thus far, saw hunters register 294,757 deer, which is just slightly ahead of the same time period for last year. DNR Deer Program Specialist Jeff Pritzel said harvest was variable across the state, with the timing of snow impacting hunters in different areas at different times throughout the gun deer season. Ice anglers have been waiting since last spring to get back out on the hard water. While temperatures are forecasted to continue to drop, ice depth should continue to improve. However, anglers should exercise extreme caution with the allure of early ice. Anglers should carry a spud to check the ice depth in front of them as they go out onto the ice and should remain aware of changing conditions throughout the day. Float suits with ice picks attached are also recommended and can keep a fall into the water from turning deadly. Not all ice is created equal, but as a general measure, ice should be at least 4 inches thick before walking on it and 5 to 7 inches thick before attempting to drive a snowmobile or ATV out onto the ice. The DNR Bear Management Advisory Committee met recently to discuss issues in bear management in the state, as well as to provide their recommendation on quotas for the 2026 bear hunting season. With 4 years since management boundaries have been redrawn, the committee had a better understanding of hunter success numbers in the newly created zones, which led to a recommendation of higher tag numbers in some of the southern zones, while holding quotas close to the same as in past years. The committee also heard some concerns about certain areas such as Sawyer and Rusk County, where as many as 109 bears were removed by USDA Wildlife Services from just one farm. This committee's recommendation will now go to the Wisconsin Conservation Congress for consideration. The recommendations from both of these groups will head to the Natural Resources Board in their January meeting for approval there too. Winter storms can significantly impact trees, as many landowners know. Ice and heavy, wet snow can break branches and bend younger trees. Even roots are susceptible when temperatures drop below zero for an extended period of time and there is no snow on the ground. Chewing by rodents, rabbits, porcupines, and deer, sun scald, and even road salt can cause damage to trees. According to the DNR, often trees will recover from these issues, but repeated or severe winter events may be too much for some trees. Trees that have been impacted by severe weather can be vectors for insects and disease. They should be removed to prevent the buildup or spread of these stressors to other trees. The DNR's Environmental Causes of Tree Damage fact sheet can be found on the DNR website, and the Minnesota Extension's Protecting Trees During Winter webpage. Those are both good resources to learn more about winter tree health. And speaking of winter weather, I recently got to talk to Abby Heilman of the Salt Watch program about the effects of road salt on the environment and the delicate balance of mitigating those effects while still keeping people safe in winter. Come back after the break to learn more about the Salt Watch program and to learn how to get involved.
For decades, I've taught you everything I know. How to safely build a fire. How to control the flames. What to do with hot coals. How to secure your chains.
There's no sparks.
But I can only teach wildfire prevention. Only you can prevent wildfires.
So, Andy, thanks for being on with me today. Kind of a good time to start talking about salt use and road salt and that sort of thing. So let's start, I guess, with the basics. What's the problem with road salt, or what should we be thinking about either if we're putting it on our driveways or municipality or that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So road salt is something that keeps us safe during the winter time, and it's something that we need to use to stay safe during the winter. But unfortunately, a lot of times we overuse it. And that's the issue that we see a lot, is this overuse of road salt, because it does have a lot of impacts, not only to our infrastructure, but also our environment, different habitats, the freshwater aquatic life that lives in our streams. It can impact our vehicles, our drinking water, and then also our pets. A lot of times people don't really think of road salt as being a pollutant. It's something that's sort of there one day and then gone the next day. And there's not a
Sure.
huge connection between really like where it goes, because it just kind of disappears. So where does it actually end up? And in many cases, it ends up going down storm drains, which lead directly to our local waterways. They don't necessarily go into sewer systems that get cleaned by water utilities. It goes directly into our local waterways. And most of our drinking water utilities, they actually don't have the infrastructure or the funding to be able to remove that salt from the water too. So it can end up in our drinking water, which can be especially a big concern for folks who are on low salt diets. They might not realize that they're getting additional salt in their drinking water, but it can be a bigger problem than that too. It's really, really expensive to replace bridges and water mains and all of these different infrastructure systems that we have. And salt is really heavily corrosive. And so just having all of that excessive salt, more than we really need to stay safe during the winter time, that sort of puts a really heavy burden on being able to replace that infrastructure. It's really, really expensive. It might be really inexpensive to use a lot of salt, but it can be really expensive in the long term to be able to replace a lot of this infrastructure.
Okay, well let's kind of break this down a little bit. Let's start with the animals, especially aquatic life. What kind of impacts does road salt have on them? And I mean, obviously you don't want things in the water that weren't normally in the water, but kind of what does research show on that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ongoing studies to really pinpoint exactly what some of these levels are, because it's tricky, right? There's not necessarily I mean, there's lots of studies that are ongoing. There's lots of studies that have been done, lots more studies that need to happen about exactly how toxic salt is in our freshwater waterways, and which organisms are most impacted by them sort of more sooner than other organisms. The US EPA in the 80s, in the 1980s, they put forward a document, and I'm happy to share this with you, that sort of gave some different levels of salt. So at 230 parts per million or milligrams per liter is when chloride, which is what we're testing for with our Salt Watch program, once chloride levels, and chloride is a common component of most of the road salts that we use. Once that reaches 230 milligrams per liter parts per million, it becomes chronically toxic to a lot of our freshwater water wildlife. Sorry, I can't speak today. So salt becomes chronically toxic to a lot of our freshwater aquatic life at that point, which means sort of over a longer period of time, maybe over a couple of days, if it remains at that level, it can really impact them. And so some organisms, especially the smaller ones, maybe things like Daphnia or like water fleas or different types of plankton, they're going to be more heavily impacted than some of these larger organisms, like some of our different fish species and things. And then at 860 parts per million or milligrams per liter, it can become acutely toxic or almost like instantly toxic to a lot of these freshwater organisms. And so for each organism, it can have different impacts. It can also impact things like amphibians, which are really sensitive species to begin with as well. So lots of different impacts from sort of reduced reproductive success of these organisms. It can impact their metabolism, lots of different things. And of course, that goes up the food chain then, especially if those smaller organisms are impacted. There's less food then for the larger organisms too.
Sure, and that's what I was going to ask about the food chain. Does chloride like biomagnify as it goes up the food chain, or is there? I mean, is there any way that anyway? I guess not to get rid of it, but to get rid of it, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, so I don't think that there's been any really like biomagnification that I've heard of for chloride. The
Okay.
issue with chloride is that it's something that's really persistent. We consider it to be sorry, hang on one sec. We consider it to be a permanent pollutant once it enters
Okay.
the environment because there's really no feasible way to remove it. And just to give you like to paint the picture of how little salt, how just a small quantity of salt can have a really big impact. 1 teaspoon of road salt is said to permanently pollute 5 gallons of water.
Well,
Because there's
that puts it
really
into perspective, huh?
yeah, there's really no feasible way to remove it once it enters the environment because it goes into the environment in so many different ways. It can go into soils and can stay around in soils for a really long time. Some of it can go into our groundwater. It can go into our waterways. It's not something that's just going to get instantly like flushed out and go to the ocean. It's going to hang around for years and years to come. So as people are thinking about going to like the grocery store or the hardware store to get salt this winter, a 50-pound bag of salt, that has the potential to pollute 10,000 gallons of water, which is about the size of a
Ooh.
residential swimming pool.
Wow. Okay. I've heard that we can get chloride out of drinking water, but it's just super, super expensive. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, in order to remove salt from drinking water, it would have to go through more of like a reverse osmosis system, which is really, really energy intensive and really expensive to do, which is just really not feasible for a lot of our water utilities that are pumping like hundreds of thousands or millions of gallons of water through every day to residents. Salt, when it dissolves in water, it is just so, so small. And it's something that like filtration systems can't really remove it. It might catch some of it, but not in the amount that we're really using today. So our water utilities, they are required to remove salt once it reaches 250 milligrams per liter of chloride within the water. At that point, it's not necessarily like harmful to human health, the chloride that they're measuring. But it's something that we can start sort of tasting in our waterways. Our drinking water might taste a little bit off to us. But again, salt, it's a little, there's a little bit of a nuance here because again, we're measuring chloride for our salt watch kits, and a lot of the water utilities are measuring chloride as well. The most commonly used type of road salt is sodium chloride. It's the most common and least expensive type of salt. And again, that's sort of the same type of salt that people have on their tables as table salt.
Okay.
There's some
Sure.
additional additives into it, so please do not eat any sort of rock salt that you're finding there on the ground. But it's not necessarily going to be in like a 1-to-1 ratio with sodium. So again, people who are on low sodium diets, even if they're like testing their water with like the Salt Watch program, for instance, if they find some of those higher levels of chloride within their water, it might not be a 1-to-1 ratio with sodium. The sodium might be less than that. But yeah, salt is something that really can't be removed from our drinking water. And so really the way to reduce the amount of salt that's going into our waterways is to reduce it from the source. So being a lot smarter about how we're applying the salt, being more mindful about our salting practices. I think one of the big issues that we have found is that how much salt people think that they need to apply. It's a really big public perception.
Well, now let's talk about the the Salt Watch program. And I take part in that program, but I think a lot of people aren't sure. What is that lady doing down by that stream there by this bridge all these times during the winter? So
Yep.
let's talk about that a little bit and what that program does and kind of the citizen
Absolutely.
science of it.
Yeah. So Salt Watch is a program through the Isaac Walton League of America. So if you're unfamiliar or if other folks are unfamiliar, the Isaac Walton League is one of the oldest conservation organizations in the United States. We were founded in 1922 by a group of anglers, so fishermen, fisherwomen, looking to essentially conserve habitats for future generations because they realized if these habitats aren't here, nobody's going to get to enjoy the things that we're enjoying today. So since then, we have developed a number of different clean water programs. The first one being the Save Our Streams program, which was launched in 1969, which is a community science program or participatory science program across the country where people can do benthic monitoring. So monitor for those benthic macroinvertebrates, the stream bugs that are in the streams. And since then, we have also launched Salt Watch, the Salt Watch program, and then also the Nitrate Watch program, which is about 3 years old now. So Salt Watch was launched in 2018 after there was a really large road salt spill outside of our national office headquarters in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And at the time, we were actually monitoring a stream site below where this salt spill took place. So we have like more historic data, being able to see like what was happening over time. And then after that salt spill, there's just this huge spike in chloride that just completely like blew up our test strips. So went beyond the capacity of our test strips.
Not good.
This is a big problem. Yeah. And of course, exactly where that salt spill was, it was on top of a storm drain that led directly to the local waterway below, which feeds into the Potomac River, which is a drinking water source for a couple million Americans.
Right.
So, yeah.
Not a small issue.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we knew, like, as a conservation organization, this is obviously a problem, but who do we call
Right.
who is responsible for this? And then who do we call to have this cleaned up? Like, is this a state problem? Is it a county problem, a city problem, like a private applicator problem? Like, who's responsible for this? So, I think after making, and this was before my time, but I think after making many, many phone calls, finally that spill was cleaned up. But obviously, as we saw with our monitoring, the damage unfortunately was already done to the stream below. So we realized with this that if we couldn't solve this problem, and we didn't have all of the answers, because obviously there's still ongoing research about just what's happening with chloride and other components of salt and waterways and the geology and ecosystem and everything. If we didn't know really what to do in this situation, then what hope do other people have, essentially?
Good call.
Yeah, so we came up with the Salt Watch program, and we wanted this to be another opportunity for people to get involved. We wanted it to be really low cost, and with basically like no barrier to entry, or as little barrier to entry as possible. So we came up with this concept of sending out free test kits to anyone who's interested in testing local waterways. So any surface waters like streams, ponds, lakes, rivers, or even now your drinking water you can test, or well water, any of those waterways. for road salt pollution. And so you can go to our website, saltwatch.org. You can email me, saltwatch@iwla.org, and we'll send you a free test kit and you can get started. You don't need any sort of training. All of the instructions are on the test kit itself or in the test kit itself. Inside of each kit are 4 test strips, so 4 opportunities for sampling, instructions for taking a sample, and instructions for uploading that data onto our website, onto our database, the cleanwaterhub.org. And so we wanted to create this as sort of that metaphorical dip your toe into the water. It's a great program that can be added onto existing monitoring programs that people are doing across the country, or if you just want to find out what's happening in your local waterways in your own
Sure.
backyard,
Sure.
it's something that you can do as well. And all of this data, I mean, obviously, if we're sending out thousands of kits each year, all of these kits, people are submitting this data. And so it's a really cool crowdsourced monitoring program where people from all over can submit their data when they're collecting it. And it really gives us a great idea of what's happening around the country with salt. And it is a year-round monitoring program, so you don't have to just wait until the winter time to get involved. You can monitor anytime, anywhere within the United States. So it's a really great opportunity for people to learn more and then to be able to take that data and create some sort of action, some sort of advocacy action, some sort of change within your community. No matter what size of change you create, it's still change, whether that's reducing salt on your own property, whether it's talking to like your HOA or condo association about trying to reduce the amount of salt, talking to people within your municipality, talking to lawmakers at any level. These are definitely things that people can do, even talking to your neighbor about reducing salt. No matter what action you take, that is making a difference, that is moving that needle. And it is hard to track to figure out like how many conversations have taken place, but I think that's the beauty of it is there's so many potential avenues for creating this change. And even if it seems like it's just a simple conversation with somebody, that can really get that ball rolling and sort of snowball down and create more and more change. So we also have a lot of different resources for people to get started to create some of this change on our website at iwla.org.
Okay. And I can attest to the fact that completing these is really easy. So anybody out there that's watching that is wondering if they can do it, you can. It's really quite easy. But can you talk about like the time commitment? Like if a person wants to get into this, how much time do they need to have to be able to dedicate to saltwater?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's another beautiful thing about our program is we don't dictate really when to monitor or how often to monitor. In an ideal world, we'd have folks go out and monitor once a month throughout the year to really be able to track what's happening with the chloride levels within those streams or waterways that you're testing. But it's really up to your own capacity and own availability. But if you go out and try it out, one of these test strips, it takes about like 3 minutes for it to be ready, for those results to be ready, and then maybe a couple more minutes to upload that data online. So it's a really, really small ask, essentially, to go out there and do this monitoring. And it's something, too, you don't have to stay out at the stream if you don't want to. If it's too cold during the winter time to go monitor, you can pick up that sample, close that container, and take it home and then monitor later because that chloride level shouldn't change as long as the seal is completely closed and nothing evaporates from that water. Because all you really need to get started too is your test kit and then a small like vial or cup. And then it'll take about 3 minutes or so and you can see those results.
Perfect. Awesome. And I know all this information is right on your website there, so people can go on there and grab that. Any last words for maybe say just a private business owner or something that needs that assurance that they're not going to get sued because somebody fell, but also kind of wants to take care of the environment a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think just starting some of these conversations, so there's a lot of applicators out there who are following some of these best practices. It might take a little bit of digging to find who some of those applicators are. I believe Wisconsin Saltwise has a list that's been ongoing. I know the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency also has a list of people who've taken their certification program. So those lists are out there, but I think also really thinking about the needs of your residents or your patrons to your business. And like if there is a parking lot you're not using during the winter time, consider blocking that off. Or if there's a staircase that's really, really hard to maintain that maybe only a couple people use, maybe consider blocking that off. Consider putting up signs like, hey, this might be like slippery during the winter time, things like that. Or just putting up signs at your business too. But I think starting some of these conversations and thinking about if you do have a contract with an applicator too, there are resources. The city of Edina has sort of a model contract for putting those best practices really at the center of those contracts. So making sure that you're not just paying for the number of pounds of salt or number of bags of salt for each storm event, but actually like those performance-based practices that the applicators have. And not all of the applicators have the most updated equipment too, but seeing sort of how they can work with you to protect the environment, protect your property, because it's not just like drinking water or the little stream bugs that you need to be concerned about. Replacing your infrastructure, your parking lots, your sidewalks, the sort of front entrance of your store areas, people are tracking in this salt. That's really expensive. And that can be a really, really expensive longer term cost, whereas salt might be cheap on the front end. But there are ways to reduce that salt amount and cut back the cost that you'll have to pay to sort of constantly be updating your sidewalks and parking lots too. So I think,
absolutely.
Yeah, starting some of those conversations and really seeing what you can do are some ways to get that started. But definitely checking out, and I can send this to you too, Becky, the model contract from the city of Edina.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you, Abby, for all your time today and all the information. And maybe we can talk again when it gets to be closer to summertime, and maybe be able to look at some of those numbers that have been coming in and see where we're at. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll send you quite a few links too, so you have them, but anybody can go onto our online database, the Clean Water Hub, cleanwaterhub.org, to really see some of those data results across the country. It's free to look at them. And we try to make the maps and everything really easy to access, understand, and share too. So you can go on there and see what's happening within your community too. And especially if there are areas that maybe nobody's monitored, that might be a place to sort of start getting some of those samples so we do have data on what's happening within some of those waterways too. Because the more we know, the more we can really work to create change that makes a meaningful change, meaningful action for change.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, thank you, Abby. I appreciate your time, and I'll get out there and do some monitoring.
Thank you so much, Becky.
Thank you.
Join us next time on Field to FenceLine, where we talk about all the things that affect us who live, work, and play in the outdoors in central Wisconsin.